Jealousy. It's said to be love's ugliest twin, a quiet voice that starts as insecurity, then turns into obsession. But in Manchester, in the autumn of 2019, that voice became deadly. A woman was found dead in her flat, her body surrounded by shattered glass and spilled wine. At first, police thought it was a robbery. Then a jealous lover confessed. Case closed, or so it seemed. Because what unfolded next would leave detectives questioning everything. The evidence, the confession, and even who the real victim truly was. It was a Friday morning, the 25th of October, 2019, when Greater Manchester Police received a 999 call from a man claiming he'd found his girlfriend dead. The caller's voice was calm, almost rehearsed. He said his name was Daniel Whitmore, 32, a warehouse supervisor from Salford. The victim, Hannah Spencer, 29, was a marketing assistant who lived in a modern flat near Deansgate. When officers arrived, they found Hannah lying on her living room floor. There were signs of a struggle, bruises, overturned furniture, a broken wine bottle. But the scene felt off. Too neat, too staged. Detective Sergeant Emma Holt, who led the investigation, later said, "It looked like someone had tried to make it look like a burglary, but didn't know what a real burglary looks like." Hannah's handbag sat untouched. Her bank cards and jewelry were still in place. Even her phone, face down on the sofa, had not been taken. Within hours, the coroner confirmed what police already suspected. Hannah Spencer had been strangled. Friends described Hannah as ambitious, kind, and endlessly patient. She'd met Daniel 2 years earlier through a mutual friend at a pub in Chorlton. At first, their relationship seemed perfect. Long walks, late-night takeaways, endless posts on social media. But beneath the smiles, there were cracks. Daniel was controlling. He would text her repeatedly if she didn't answer within minutes. He'd show up at her office unannounced. And after every argument, he'd apologize with gifts, flowers, or promises that he'd change. In July 2019, Hannah finally ended it. Friends said she'd had enough. She moved out, changed her locks, and even told colleagues, "If he turns up again, I'll call the police." But Daniel didn't let go. He called her dozens of times, created fake accounts to follow her online, and began sending messages that grew darker. One of them read, "If I can't have you, no one will." That message was found on Hannah's phone, sent 2 days before she died. On the night of the murder, neighbors heard shouting around 10:30 p.m. One recalled hearing a man's voice yelling, "Don't walk away from me," followed by silence. When police questioned Daniel the next morning, he looked broken, shaking, crying, saying he couldn't remember much after seeing Hannah on the floor. Within an hour, he confessed. He said they'd argued about her seeing someone new. He said he lost control, and he said he never meant to hurt her. To detectives, it sounded open and shut, a domestic dispute that turned deadly, tragic, but straightforward. But as the days passed, something didn't add up. Daniel's version of events kept changing. First, he said she hit him first. Then he said she fell. Then he said he blacked out. And when forensic teams checked the crime scene, they found something chilling. There were no fingerprints, not on the bottle, not on the doorknob, not on the phone. Everything had been wiped clean, and Hannah's phone, the one with that final message, had been used an hour after she was already dead. Detectives began to suspect Daniel hadn't acted alone. But if not him, then who? Forensic analysis of Hannah's phone data showed a strange pattern. Her phone had connected to Wi-Fi at a local cafe at 1:15 a.m., long after Daniel claimed he'd left the flat. That cafe was 3 miles away, in the opposite direction of his home, and there was CCTV. A man wearing a black hoodie walking past the cafe with Hannah's phone in hand. The timestamp, 1:18 a.m. When officers enhanced the footage, the man's build didn't match Daniel's. He was shorter, leaner. So who was he? It was Daniel's younger brother, Mark Whitmore, 28, a nightclub doorman with a record for assault. Police now faced a new theory. Daniel had killed Hannah, and Mark had helped cover it up. But when questioned, Mark claimed he had nothing to do with it. He said Daniel called him in tears, asked him to get rid of something, and he thought it was drugs, not evidence. He admitted taking Hannah's phone, but denied touching the scene. Then came a twist no one saw coming. 2 weeks before the murder, Daniel's employer had filed a complaint, claiming company funds were missing. Thousands of pounds had been siphoned into an untraceable account. The bank statements showed transfers in both Daniel's and Hannah's names. When police examined Hannah's work laptop, they found files indicating she'd discovered the theft days before she died. Emails she'd drafted but never sent, confronting Daniel and threatening to report him. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a crime of desperation. Detectives now believe Daniel killed Hannah not out of jealousy, but to silence her. Mark's involvement shifted from accessory to possible accomplice, because when police raided his home, they found a pair of gloves with Hannah's blood inside the fibers. It was the moment everything changed. Daniel, once remorseful, went silent. His brother, once defensive, began to talk. Mark told detectives that after Daniel killed Hannah, he'd panicked, not about love, but about money. He said Daniel feared being exposed, losing his job, and going to prison for fraud. Mark claimed his brother called him to fix it, to clean the scene, move items, and stage a break-in. In return, Daniel promised him £5,000 from the stolen funds, but Mark said he didn't know Hannah was dead until it was too late. The trial began in February 2021 at Manchester Crown Court. Prosecutors painted a picture of jealousy, deceit, and greed. They argued Daniel Whitmore was a man driven not just by possessiveness, but by panic. When confronted with exposure, he killed the one person who could ruin him. Mark Whitmore was charged with assisting an offender and perverting the course of justice. Throughout the trial, Daniel sat emotionless, staring at the floor, rarely speaking. Hannah's family filled the public gallery every day, wearing her favorite color, green, as a symbol of strength. When the verdict was read, the courtroom fell silent. Daniel Whitmore, guilty of murder. Mark Whitmore, guilty of assisting. Daniel was sentenced to life with a minimum of 22 years. Mark received 5. But even as the case closed, the story didn't end. Because while police searched Daniel's bank accounts, they found new evidence, transactions tied to yet another name. A woman he'd been secretly seeing while dating Hannah. Her name was Clara Dean, and what she told detectives would shatter everything they thought they knew. In the end, jealousy wasn't the only motive, it was just the surface. Underneath it lay greed, fear, and cowardice. A man so consumed by control that he destroyed the one person who trusted him most. Hannah Spencer's name became a symbol, not just of loss, but of awareness. Her family founded a campaign for domestic abuse prevention, focusing on emotional coercion, the kind that doesn't leave bruises until it's too late. In love, we often look for passion, but sometimes the loudest hearts hide the darkest storms. Months after Daniel's conviction, detectives followed one final lead, a phone call traced to Clara Dean, the woman he'd been seeing in secret. Her message was brief. She said Daniel wasn't the only one stealing money, and that Hannah's death might not have been his first mistake. Clara Dean, 31, worked in finance for a Manchester property firm. Smart, composed, nothing like the chaos that followed Daniel Whitmore's life. She'd met him months before Hannah's murder. To police, she seemed like just another affair. But Clara brought something no one expected. Records, bank transfers, 4 in total. Each between £2,000 and £5,000, moved through an offshore account registered under a shell name, Rose Holdings Limited. And on those transfers were 2 authorization codes, one matching Daniel's payroll system, the other belonging to Hannah Spencer. Clara said Daniel had begged her to help move money he called investment bonuses. He'd told her Hannah was in on it, but weeks before the murder, he panicked, saying Hannah had turned on him. When detectives showed Clara the same codes from their fraud inquiry, she froze. He said someone higher up was using him, she whispered. He said he wasn't supposed to take the blame. Forensic accountants traced Rose Holdings, limited to a virtual office in London. The address linked to 10 other shell firms, all funneling small sums into construction bids. Buried in the data was one legitimate client, Vanguard Developments, a regional property company contracting council projects. Among its directors was a familiar name, Paul Renner, Daniel's area manager at the warehouse. Emails between Daniel and Renner revealed coded language. Deliveries, clearing, client receipts. Investigators believed it was corporate fraud, but what shocked them was the date of the last exchange, the night Hannah Spencer was killed. Renner wrote, "Clean the ledger." "No noise," Daniel replied. "Handled." Renner was arrested in June 2021 on suspicion of conspiracy to defraud and obstruction of justice. He denied any link to Hannah's death, claiming Daniel acted out of jealousy. But when confronted with Clara's statement, his confidence cracked. He admitted that Daniel had siphoned company funds for him in exchange for cash kickbacks. When Hannah found out, Daniel told Renner she was threatening to report them both. Renner said he told him to sort it quietly. The prosecution would later call that phrase an order that killed a woman. For detectives, this was the first major power shift. Daniel wasn't just a jealous lover, he was part of a web of corruption, and Hannah had stumbled straight into it. The deeper detectives went, the more Clara risked. She confessed that after Daniel's arrest, she received anonymous texts. "Keep quiet or you'll join her." Tracing the number led nowhere. The SIM was prepaid, unregistered, last pinged near the docks where the fraudulent contracts began. Then Clara revealed something else. Daniel had recorded conversations, insurance he called it. He'd hidden a flash drive in a safety deposit box at a bank under her name. Inside that drive were voice memos, half deleted, distorted, but one file stood out. "If she talks, we're finished. I'll handle it, but you owe me 2 voices, Daniel's, and another older, steady northern accent." Police believed it was Paul Renner. The evidence transformed the case from domestic tragedy to corporate conspiracy. Renner was charged with manslaughter and financial corruption. Clara entered witness protection. At trial, prosecutors argued that Renner exploited Daniel's obsession to silence Hannah permanently. He didn't need to pull the trigger, he only needed to whisper the idea. The defense claimed Daniel acted alone out of jealousy, but the jury heard the tape. It was enough. Renner was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 14 years. The court described the killing as a murder born from greed and fueled by manipulation. For Hannah's family, it was vindication, but not peace. Her mother said outside court, "It wasn't jealousy that killed our daughter. It was men protecting money." In the months that followed, Greater Manchester Police launched Operation Glassline, a national review of corporate fraud linked to violent crime. It uncovered 11 cases where financial cover-ups led to intimidation, assault, or worse. Clara Dean rebuilt her life under a new identity. She said she still wakes to the sound of a phone buzzing in the night. Daniel Whitmore remains in prison, rarely speaking to anyone. But in 2023, he filed an appeal, claiming Renner had threatened his family, forcing him to act. And during that appeal, a sealed document was submitted, a list of transactions involving an unknown third party. Each one signed only with initials. CD detectives reopened the case quietly. When they cross-checked the initials with archived payroll data, the match was devastating. The account belonged not to Clara Dean, but to Caroline Davis, an accounts officer inside the same company, still employed there. A woman with full access to the ledgers Hannah had tried to expose. And one of the numbers linked to that account was the same unregistered phone that had sent Clara the threats. It meant someone else had been watching the entire time. Someone still free. For 2 years, Manchester police thought they'd close the book on one of the city's most senseless murders. A jealous lover, a secret affair, a woman caught in the middle. But then a new name appeared in the records, one no one had seen before. Caroline Davis, the woman behind the numbers. And what investigators found in her files would change everything they believed about Hannah Spencer's death. The discovery began quietly. An accountant reviewing archived payroll data noticed that one of the shell companies, Rose Holdings Limited, continued to receive payments after both Daniel Whitmore and Paul Renner were in prison. The authorization code? CD Caroline Davis. Caroline had been a senior accounts officer at Vanguard Developments, the company at the heart of the fraud. By all accounts, she was unremarkable, punctual, polite, invisible. No criminal record, no obvious connection to any of the suspects. But when detectives pulled her access logs, they discovered something impossible. She had logged into the company server using Renner's credentials 3 days before Hannah was killed. That meant someone inside the company knew what was coming. By spring 2023, Greater Manchester Police quietly reopened the case. This time, it wasn't about jealousy or revenge, it was about power. Caroline Davis was interviewed under caution. She denied everything. She said she'd barely known Daniel, that she was only following instructions. When detectives asked whose instructions, she paused and said one word: Renner. But Renner was in prison under maximum surveillance. Yet investigators discovered that Caroline had visited him twice under a different name. Her reason? To prey. Detectives now suspected Caroline had been part of the fraud ring from the start, the quiet link between the men pulling strings and the money keeping them silent. And she wasn't alone. Caroline Davis had a past she'd never disclosed. In 2015, she'd worked for a logistics company based in Salford, the same warehouse chain Daniel later joined. Her supervisor back then? Paul Renner. Archived emails revealed coded correspondence between them dating back 8 years. Phrases like, "the books must balance," and "quiet accounts only," the same language used in the shell companies. For investigators, it was a chilling revelation. The fraud wasn't a side project. It was an organized pipeline of laundering, moving dirty money through construction bids, real estate contracts, and payroll ghost accounts. And Hannah Spencer, the marketing assistant who loved her job, had unknowingly tripped the alarm by tracing a missing client invoice. The woman who seemed least connected to Hannah's murder had been the one standing closest to its cause all along. To prove Caroline's role, detectives needed evidence, something that linked her directly to the night of the murder. For months, they found nothing. Then in August 2023, a forensics officer reviewing old CCTV made an unexpected find. At 11:17 p.m. on the night Hannah died, a silver hatchback was caught on a side street near her flat. The number plate had been obscured with mud, but when enhanced, one digit was visible. It matched a car registered to Caroline Davis. Investigators confronted her again. This time, she stayed silent. When asked why she was near the crime scene, she simply said, "I was told to check it was done." It was the first admission that someone else had orchestrated Hannah's murder. Not for love, but to ensure the silence of an employee who'd found the truth. The trial of Caroline Davis began in March 2024 at Manchester Crown Court. The courtroom was full: journalists, victims' families, former colleagues. Prosecutors described her as the ghost in the machine, the person who moved money, cleaned evidence, and pulled strings from the shadows. They argued she was part of a criminal triangle: Renner, the manipulator; Daniel, the weapon; Caroline, the silence between them. The jury heard how she'd used Hannah's login credentials weeks before her death to alter financial reports. They saw CCTV of her car circling the estate, and they listened to recordings from the Renner-Whitmore tapes, reanalyzed by experts. A third voice was found, faint, barely audible beneath static. Female. 2 words. "It's done." Prosecutors said it was Caroline. Her defense said it could have been anyone. After 14 days of deliberation, the verdict arrived: guilty of conspiracy to pervert the course of justice and complicity in manslaughter. She was sentenced to 18 years in prison. For Hannah's family, the verdict brought relief, but also heartbreak, because every step of this story had revealed the same truth. She hadn't died because she was loved too much. She died because she refused to stay silent. Her mother said after the sentencing, "It started with jealousy. It ended with corruption. And somewhere in between, we lost our daughter Clara Dean, still under a new identity, gave her final statement to the court via video link. Her voice trembled, but her words stayed clear. If Hannah hadn't spoken up, none of this would have come to light. She died telling the truth. The least we can do is keep telling it." But outside court, one final question lingered. Who was Caroline reporting to? Because in her testimony, she hinted at someone else, an anonymous figure who financed the entire network. She called him the director. From jealousy to fraud, from love to greed, the Manchester case became a mirror of modern corruption, how one woman's courage exposed an empire built on deceit. Hannah Spencer's story isn't just about loss. It's about what happens when truth collides with power, and how even in death, a single voice can shake the walls of silence. But if there's one lesson Manchester learned, it's this. Behind every crime, there's always someone still listening. Because when police followed Caroline's final lead, they found one more account, a new company, and the signature was familiar. The initials were the same, CD. But the name wasn't Caroline Davis, it was Charles Denham, a man who vanished from Manchester 5 years earlier. For 3 years, detectives believed the Manchester murder was finished. A jealous lover, a silenced whistleblower, a conspiracy unmasked. But one final name waited in the shadows, a man who'd been watching the entire time. His initials matched the very first code ever logged in Rose Holdings Limited. CD, not Caroline Davis, but Charles Denham. Charles Denham was a name that had appeared briefly, then vanished. Born in Liverpool, trained accountant, last employed by Vanguard Developments in 2015, the same year the fraud began. He resigned suddenly, sold his home, and disappeared abroad. No passport stamps, no forwarding address. But in 2024, during a financial crime audit linked to Operation Glassline, Denham's name resurfaced. Hidden deep within a ghost file labeled Consultancy Payments Archived, investigators found recurring transfers, coded, small, precise, each signed off by Caroline Davis. Each routed through shell companies Hannah Spencer had unknowingly flagged. The final transaction, £42,000, had been sent 3 days after Caroline's conviction. Destination, Malta. Recipient, C. Denham Holdings. Interpol traced the account to a serviced office in Valletta. The space had been rented under a fake business name, but CCTV told another story. A man mid-40s, sharp suit, walking with the ease of someone who never thought he'd be caught. Facial recognition confirmed the match. Charles Denham. For British detectives, the revelation was seismic. Denham wasn't dead or missing. He was thriving, coordinating new contracts, moving millions through offshore fronts. He'd been the architect from the beginning, the director of every fraudulent ledger, every silenced witness. And in Manchester, his reach hadn't ended with Hannah Spencer. Phone records from Caroline Davis's seized devices revealed multiple encrypted calls made in the months before her arrest, each routed through a foreign number registered to Denham's shell companies. Even Daniel Whitmore's burner phone, the one he used to text his brother, had once connected to a Maltese network tower. Coincidence? Detectives didn't think so. Former warehouse employees told investigators Denham used to visit unannounced, calling himself a consultant for compliance. He'd audit finances, remove computers, and instruct staff to delete emails for security. To them, he was intimidating but official. To detectives, he was the puppet master hiding behind legitimate paperwork. And according to one witness, Denham had warned Daniel months before the murder, "Keep her quiet. The company can't afford noise." In January 2025, Denham boarded a flight to London, unaware that the NCA had issued a sealed warrant. He was detained quietly at passport control, carrying 2 phones, 3 credit cards, and a notebook filled with numbers and code names. Among them, R Holdings, CD, and one more, HS. When asked, Denham smiled. "I don't know who that is," he said. But in his briefcase, officers found something chilling, a printed news clipping of Hannah Spencer's memorial service. No annotations, no markings, just folded and kept. Interrogations lasted days. Denham denied orchestrating anything, claiming he'd been framed by subordinates. Yet investigators uncovered encrypted backups of correspondence between him, Renner, and Caroline Davis, spanning nearly a decade. One line sent the night before Hannah's death read, "The ledger closes tonight." Denham refused to explain. The trial of Charles Denham began in July 2025, drawing national attention. For the first time, the Manchester case became a national scandal, linking local corruption to corporate money laundering across Europe. Prosecutors presented Denham as the silent strategist who engineered both fraud and death to preserve his empire. Defense lawyers painted him as a scapegoat, a convenient villain to close a messy case. But the evidence was damning. Audio recovered from his encrypted drives included voice notes instructing payments to be moved before she speaks. The timestamps matched the 48 hours before Hannah Spencer was murdered. And yet, even with overwhelming evidence, the case fractured. Key witnesses recanted. Documents vanished. A juror fell ill under suspicious circumstances. When the verdict came, it shocked everyone. Charles Denham, not guilty of murder, convicted only of large-scale financial fraud, sentenced 12 years. For Hannah's family, it felt like betrayal all over again. The man who started everything would one day walk free. Months later, during a press interview from prison, Denham finally spoke. Calm, cold, almost proud. "I didn't kill anyone," he said. "People make choices. I just gave them reasons." He admitted orchestrating fraud. He admitted using aliases. But when asked about Hannah Spencer, he paused for the first time. "She was smart," he said quietly. "Too smart to stay quiet. That's dangerous in business." To this day, those are his only recorded words about her. 5 years on, the Manchester case remains one of Britain's most haunting modern tragedies. Not just for how it began, but for what it revealed. A chain of greed stretching from boardrooms to backstreets. A woman who tried to tell the truth and died for it. And a city still learning that corruption doesn't always wear a mask. In 2025, Parliament introduced the Spencer Clause, mandating whistleblower protection in corporate investigations. It was named in honor of Hannah Spencer, the woman who refused to stay silent. But as investigators file away the last boxes from Operation Glassline, one mystery remains. Because inside Denham's confiscated notebook, beneath the list of names, 3 letters were circled. RGH. No one knows what they mean. But according to one retired officer, it might be another company or another name. And if that's true, the director's story isn't finished. Subscribe to UK Crime Mysteries for more stories Britain can't forget.